Hi, I'm Anupam Chakravarty. I'm a postdoc in the Yarosh lab. Mythical creatures have a way of working their way into my research. I work on this class of proteins called prions, which are essentially like shapeshifters from mythology. In general, proteins are programmed to have a three-dimensional shape. On the other hand, prions can attain multiple shapes, sometimes depending on the environment that they're in, and at least one of the forms they attain can be inherited, very much like our DNA. These prion proteins typify a paradigm-shifting mode of inheritance, and work from our laboratory and a few others have shown that cells can harness the power of these shapeshifters both in health and disease. The specific prion I work on is called Smog, named after the dragon from Tolkien's universe. Early on, during the development of an embryo, the Smog protein is tasked with destroying the messages from one's mom to set the stage for the newborn to express oneself. That actually is a nice segue to this. The way we express ourselves is in some ways what defines us as an individual. I find a lot of joy in photographing landscapes. I grew up in the foothills of the Himalayas in the eastern part of India. So as you might imagine, there were tons of landscapes to experience, from rolling hills with tea gardens to snow-capped mountains, which were the highest in the world. My mother had noted as a high schooler that I enjoyed the outdoors and got me this point-and-shoot camera. While it was a pretty basic camera, I started to learn the art of composing a photograph. Since high school, I've had the opportunity to live in 5 different places around the world, each offering a unique set of landscapes. Pursuing landscape photography is a little more stochastic than periodic for me. Certainly the times I am on vacation gives me the opportunity to get many photos, some of which I've ruminated on for years before putting it out in the public. This is mostly because my day job is exciting enough to keep me from these. Being in Northern California is a great boon for my hobby. I don't have to try too hard to find amazing and diverse landscapes. Landscape photography has certainly taught me to enjoy the journey more than the destination. If I get a great photograph, that's a huge win. If not, I have at least had the chance to take a break from work and enjoy the outdoors. Now, thematically speaking, that is very similar to designing a new experiment, which is what I mostly do at work. If the experiment I have designed confirms my hypothesis, that feels great. If not, I've still learned something new that will help inform my future experimental planning. The other aspect about landscape photography, which I find intimately related to my profession as a scientist, is that of telling a story. Every landscape that you encounter in a photograph has a story behind it. Same is true for every scientific finding one puts out in the public. Sometimes the rigmarole of the latter process can be frustrating. Remembering that this was always meant to be a storytelling endeavor always helps me to focus back on it. Also, from a technical standpoint, the tools that I use for landscape photography have a thematic overlap with the imaging tools I use for my research. One of my favorite stories on this front is a couple years back, I was working with now CSB alum Richard Shee in Will Greenleaf's lab in the Beckman building. We had our first success in trying to image RNA-protein interactions on the surface of a microscopic chip. Since we're doing it in a massively parallel scale, this involved millions of clusters of these molecules that appeared as bright fluorescent dots on a dark surface. A week after our first successful experiment, I was visiting Hawaii, the Big Island, specifically near Mauna Kea, which houses greater than 90% of the telescopes that are on Earth, mainly because there are greater than 300 days of clear sky up there. While chatting with an astronomer there, I showed him a picture of this microscopic chip with these molecules on it that I had taken with a phone. He and his colleagues were intrigued about it, and they started discussing about which part of this night sky might this be. The Trapezium cluster, the Orion Nebula, and so on. Personally, it was comforting to note that there is an underlying thread of unification among endeavors in science that span the entire breadth of length scales, from the micron to the light years.